What kinds of things from your background or your family have you unlearned, or are you actively unlearning as it relates to your sexuality?
I would say definitely shame about even talking about sexuality, about exploring sexuality. I think I think even though I had the space to openly like talk about it with my mom and with my grandmother, I also think that just based off of like some of the experiences my mom has had, she also felt like shame around it. And so I don't really feel like our conversations were as robust. And I also think that I, kind of to what you mentioned before, have kind of taken a freer approach and like really want to explore everything. Like I want to take life and just explore without fear. And I think fear has hindered a lot of my family in going for what they want in any capacity. And I want to break that generational curse. I was the first one to like travel, the first one to, and I'm always on the go. Like I'll book a one-way ticket, I'll try new things, try new food, try new people, try new experiences, all because I feel like that's something that that we didn't get to do. And my mom always tells me, she's like, yes, you go do it. I'm living vicariously through you. But even now, like she's about to come take a pole class with us. So, I think it's also not only been beneficial to me to try and unlearn some of the shame, but I think it's also, it's encouraging even the older generations to like also put away their shame. And so that reflects back to me because I'm like, okay, gotta keep going, gotta keep taking these steps because it actually means something and has impact for all of my family.
Yeah, I think for myself, it's a lot of leaning into discomfort instead of leaning away from it. I think a lot of how sex and sexuality was posited to me, even in like a school setting, is there is no sex ed. The sex ed is abstinence. And if you don't engage in abstinence, you are a used chocolate bar that no one is ever gonna want. That was an actual, actual sermon. So,
used chocolate bar.
And so I think there's a lot of restructuring, and not relating to yourself like this object that is now defiled after you engage in this very natural, part of life. And so I think leaning into discomfort has helped me identify for myself that I'm doing something different than what was taught to me. And then also, it helps relating to it rather than looking at it like it's uncomfortable. Let's just get curious about what this is all about to teach us. I think leaning in instead of leaning all the way in the opposite direction.
I've always been kind of the family outlier, and so it's none of it's really new to me. I think for sure there's always been talk of the shame and like you were saying, the used chocolate bar, maybe not those words, but also just piggybacking off of what you said about not having to just pick one thing. Mm-hmm. That's one thing I've unlearned mostly from the younger generation, or when I was a social worker, meeting kids that were gender nonconforming or gender fluid and things like that, and like one day dressed like a boy and one day dressed like a girl, and just even taking lots of trainings on social worker trainings on, okay, this is where we're at in the world today. We've got people who identify with they, them pronouns. We've got people who identify with he, she pronouns. All of these things are things, of course, that most of us grew up with. I never thought of any of it as being bad, but just learning and meeting people who identify like that and an understanding that we're all valid human beings.
I think as a teen, I tried to do my very best to be a good girl and like be perceived by the world as this like very pure person. And then I got pregnant in college. And like that was like one of my first sexual experiences. And I was like, oh no, I'm tarnished. I'm shamed. My reputation forever is like terrible now. And when I realized that that also didn't mean anything, and what I know for sure is that people are too caught in their own selves to really be paying attention to you. And also when they're judging you, they're really just judging themselves. And when I became liberated from caring what other people think about the way that I live my life, I think that opened a door for me to expound and expand on what I thought about sexuality and who I can be and who I can show up as. I think we put a lot of pressure on girls to be pure and virginal and things like that. And don't nobody want no virgin. Girl, what is you doing? Go to practice, go to school. But no, I think that the world, I think it's coming around though. It's much more expansive. I have a teenager, so, the way he talks about it, and he's queer and trans. So, like the way that I learned from him about the expansiveness of sexuality, I'm just like, oh dang, like this world has so much to offer.
Having more fun.
So many new colors,
Right.
To paint with, And I think that's cool. And I think it's cool that the younger generation is not bound to what we think at all. They're like, girl.
It is so it's inspiring.
It really is.
It's just about freedom and a lack of fear. And when I know I keep talking about fear, but the expectations, we've been talking a little bit about religion and church, and I write in my my book about how church and religion has shackled women's sexuality, had a chokehold on women's sexuality for forever. And I think that that if you are feeling just free and not allowing fear of rejection or fear of judgment to carry your steps, right, and to inform your direction, then that's really what it's all about. That's really what empowerment is all about in all aspects of our lives, not just sexuality or pleasure, but just allowing yourself to say, what's the worst thing that can happen? That this person doesn't like me, well, then they don't like me. If they're gonna judge me for my voice, for the thing, for me specifically saying, I'm communicating what I want and what I need, and that may not be for you, and then that's okay. But it's still a true expression of who I am, is what I think, freedom.
Yeah, that's like the Nina Simone quote. She says, I tell you what freedom is to me, it's no fear. Yeah, that's like one of my favorite quotes, because that is true freedom, is not being afraid of your desire, of your pleasure, of your passion, of having the conversations, of leaning into the discomfort. Like that takes someone who is not afraid. Or it takes someone who is afraid and they're still doing it, right? And that's true bravery. You're being your own hero. And I think that like a lot of times women especially, they want someone to come save them. When you save yourself and you like claim that power and you're like, actually I want this. Actually I'm not afraid to say it. Actually I don't care how you look at me after I say it. That's like some true freedom right there. And so like liberating yourself. And me and my friends have crazy conversations. Just on New Year's Eve, we're sitting in a restaurant, we have our notes app out, and we're asking each other, oh, what do you say during sex?
Yes,
like what are some of your key phrases? Like, I'm like, how do you say it? Like, what's the tone you say it in?
Each one teach one.
Yes, and we're like writing this stuff down. I'm like, oh, I'm about to go practice that at home. Like, I never thought I would have those types of conversations, but being around people who are fearless and are unapologetic. I have a friend, she's like, oh, I heal a lot of my trauma through kink.
Absolutely.
And I was like, what? How? Tell me more. Yeah. And she's like, I've had this traumatic thing happen to me, so I'll have my partner do this, and we'll play it out this way instead. And I'm just like mind blown at the possibilities of how you can heal yourself through sexual experiences. But that takes liberation, and it takes, you not being afraid to explore those things.
Yeah, I think what also is coming to mind for me is folks especially folks who identify as women, are often socialized to believe that someone is going to save you. And I think the thing that they're often wanting to be saved from is the discomfort of not knowing. And so if someone else can figure out my sexual self, if I can just lean into what makes you happy, then that's okay. But I think there is so much more power in reclaiming that and fumbling through the parts that allow you to get to the end goal of really finding your most liberated sexual self. I know for myself, a long time, I was having a lot of, I wouldn't say vanilla sex, but just like, it's like Taco Bell, and what you're wanting is a steak. And last time you had a steak, you was like, that was my shit. And so I think when it came to me exploring some very specific kinks, I would always shy away from them with partners and kind of try to scratch the itch as best I could on my own. But finally stepping fully, I think, into a kink community and finding other folks who are like the sadist to my masochist was a beautiful experience to be able to know that the thing that you are wanting, someone is actually capable of handling that in the exact way that you're wanting. And it's just very affirming and leads itself to more empowerment. So.